Well, people in Rockport also dealing with the aftermath of the rain. Some of them who were still rebuilding from Harvey are now back to square one. Our Madeline Dart joins us with some of those problems. Maddie.
Yeah, Michelle, the water was so high in various neighborhoods throughout Rockport. There were drainage ditches which couldn't withstand the influx of water, causing an inflow into people's yards, causing some of these people to make pricey repairs to their homes.
This is the worst it has ever been.
Nancy Pierce can hardly walk to her front door.
So it's basically a river running through it. It's horrible.
A drainage ditch turning into a creek near her house, flooding her backyard and shed. She says it's a similar sight throughout Rockport.
The constant flooding, it's not going anywhere, it's not draining, it's horrible.
Pierce says it's the last thing they needed after recovering from Harvey. Now she'll have to replace the washing machine and dryer in her shed, on top of damage underneath her home.
It saturated all the insulation that we just put underneath there. So now we're going to have to go back and redo that. My brand new shed.
The floodwater also posing a risk for Pierce's grandchildren who live with her. Can they even leave right now?
No, only if they're carried. That's it. That's the only way.
Yet Pierce says she'll power through the tough times just like last year.
We made it through the hurricane. We'll do the best we can now.
Nancy says her biggest concern right now is getting rid of the standing water. They found cottonmouths swimming through it, and of course, mosquitoes are coming out in full force. Michelle?